Empire.
Hello and welcome to another live stream edition of the John Comic Report. Do me a favor, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find me there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. There's a little bit of news today. As you can see, I'm joined by Sam Fortier from the Washington Post, who also has a little few nuggets of news of his own. So, Sam, first of all, thanks for joining me. And second, I guess talk about the topical stuff today. First of all, they hired Mark Klaus to be the new team president, taking over in the role that Jason Wright no longer has been in. And for people wondering, he comes from the Campbell's company, was the CEO, president, et cetera, et cetera. He is not going to have any say in football. The football operations is strictly a business move. He will answer to Josh Harris. Adam Peters will answer to Josh Harris. So for people who always are kind of wondering about that. But anyways, so that's one piece of the news. Sam, you also had on the RFK site update, a little piece of news there too from the Maryland side, I guess.
Kyle, it does not feel like the start of a bye week, man. It's been really busy so far, and I know this stuff can get confusing. So please tell me if I need to slow down at all. But basically, because of the way Congress works, and because of the way the team, the DC, RFK bill supporter contingent needs to pass this bill by the end of the session, which is at the end of the year. Maryland can slow this process down. They can potentially derail this process. And so they have asked for three things. One is for the team to declare its intentions about where it will go. Two is to give assurances about what they're going to do with with the Landover land if they leave it. And three, probably the buzziest one, is they want basically a squadron from DC's Air National Guard. And that's been a fight that's been simmering for a long time, in part because Maryland is losing its Air National Guard because of an Air Force decision basically to turn that from a combat wing into a cyber unit. And so they have asked for DC's Air National Guard, and DC has said, no, we're not willing to do that. They did that back in April. And now Maryland is kind of coming back and saying, well, if you're interested in the RFK bill passing, if you give us that, we may not oppose it. So there's a lot there to break down, but hopefully I did it in an okay way.
Yeah, and I think there's still this thing is always going to be twists and turns. It seems like every step of the way, right? And there's already been some. So who knows where this goes? But what sense do you get from the people you've talked to about the direction that this might head?
Like you said, it's difficult to predict in Congress, but I think that the supporters of the RFK bill feel pretty good about this passing. They feel okay about it. And like I said, it's by the end of the year. December 20th is the target date for Congress to adjourn this session. Shout out to Steve for shouting out my mom. We thought about doing this last week when my mom was actually in town for Thanksgiving, and Kyle was like, nah. We can't bring up too big a celeb on the show.
I did promise her that I'd take you to see Santa next weekend. So just shout out Miss Fortier. I will take him to see Santa. So there you go. Anyways, back to the real stuff.
When you say Santa, you mean Mr. Klaus.
There you go. All right. See, Sam's got some dad jokes. See,
hey. I've come on this podcast enough with you that I'm like, all right, I can do it.
And here you go. And Tom also brings up Sammy TikTok. So there we go. Anyways, but you listen, for those of you listening, Sam does do a good job on TikTok, wrapping up stuff. You were really good for a few weeks in a row at getting a high level celebrity in each of those shots. But I don't want to say anything lately. I haven't been in there, but I'm just,
all I'm going to say is our metrics, our viewership,
probably gone up.
Our followers, they've really gone up since I've stopped bringing on, a certain ESPN reporter.
Well, I'm glad I could get the momentum started for that. Anyways, so let's get to the field too, because all that stuff, the political stuff, all that stuff, the Klaus hiring, whether it's, they seem to be pretty excited about it, but that's also business side, that's culture in the building, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get to the field. So as we sit here in the bye week, first of all, how miserable do you think it would have been for everybody had this team not done what it did Sunday?
I think it would have been a week of questions, a week everyone trying to get away, and they would not have been able to clear their heads. But I do actually kind of want to pause real quick before we get to the field and say that, excuse me, oh, we're doing it live, so we can't edit that out. Because they're performing well on the field right now, because they're 8-5 in position for the playoffs, like, I think that shows kind of where this ownership group has been at so far, right? Like, they came in last July and their first thing was, hey, we need to get the temporary stadium right. We need to get the football operations right. And so now you're seeing, as they're being successful on the field, you're seeing them shift their focus, or not.
Right.
They have shifted their focus, but now they're hitting critical points in, the business side, in the stadium, and I think that the next steps, if they undertake it, and I think it's uncertain, but is a rebrand on the horizon. Like, those are the things down the field. I think that they're potentially I think that when you're talking about the steps that they're going in, you're seeing a very methodical approach. And so now I think they're hitting a really important part in their business and where they're going to be for the future.
And let's take there for 1 second though, because I think that's very right. And I think it's important to know, because there is, I know people in Philly don't like to hear the word process, but they have a process of how they like to operate. And it's why when people came in and people, when they first came in, were kind of yelling about rebrand right now. It's like, you need to take it on when you take, if you wanted to do that. And there is zero assurances that that's going to happen. But if you did, they always said down the road, because you need to get your house in order first. If they had done some rebrand and then you don't do anything else to do it right, or kind of devote it half-ass one way or another, it doesn't go that way. And anyways, but I do think, like, you're right. Like, the goal for them was fix the product on the field first. Like, that's your first priority. Fix the stadium up, and then you start turning yourself to other ways. And they always talked about it being like at least probably a 5-year process before things really started to get to where they wanted it to be.
Winning off the field starts with winning on the field. Like you got to have that part.
Little throwback.
And one thing I want to say on the rebrand, because I know that some people, I've seen some chatter about this on Twitter.
It's not happening.
Well, it's not necessarily happening, but I think the important part is, like, in a part of the stadium process is after Steve Daines, takes away his block and he goes on Fox News and says, like, the logo is coming back. Like, they're having conversations about that. That is, I don't know if you might have addressed this on your podcast before, but I want to be very clear with people that is, like,
not happening.
Slam dunk. They're not like, they are not having these discussions in, when they met with Chuck Schumer, when Josh Harris and Roger Goodell met with Chuck Schumer on Monday, like, that was from my understanding, was not on the agenda. That's not on the table. They're talking about the RFK land specifically. And so, like, the notion that the logo is, like, coming back or in process, or they're, like, making maneuvers, I want to be clear, that's not happening right now.
No, right. And I don't know. Listen, you know what it is? And my understanding is more like, if you have, for example, the shirt with Darryl Green on it from the past, you're going to have the Redskins logo on there. You're not going to take that off. You're going to, if you're using something from the past, you will use the logo for that. It's not coming back as part of who they are right now. It's, if you're using historical things in a banner and a whatever on the scoreboard, whatever it is, like, but it's not coming back to part of the uniforms. So
no, I think that, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. And anyways, let's get to the field though, too, because I do think, like, that's what people want to talk about or hear about too. Just how important was it to get that win the other day?
Really huge. And I think that when you look at this team and when you hear Bobby Wagner talk about it was important for us to have fun, that really resonated with me, because he was like, look, like, coming into the year, whether people in the locker room want to acknowledge it or not, like, expectations were low for this team. And I remember talking to Clelin Ferrell in May about just like, yeah, like, people don't expect much from us. Like, we're excited about that. Like, we're going to go out and ball out and upset Cincinnati and, do a bunch of things that people didn't think we could do. But like, the texture of this team has really changed. Like, now they're fighting for a playoff position. People were expecting, like, hey, if they can beat Philly on the road, they're going to, maybe control the division. Like, so I think that this team, not just playing 13 straight weeks, but assuming the yoke of expectations like this, it's really important, I think, for them to have Bobby Wagner for, that being one of those reasons, Zach Ertz and some of those other veteran mentors, like, dudes that have done it before. And so for those guys to say, hey, like, to come up and say, hey, chill out, like, we're going to be fine, just have fun. And yeah, they beat up on a worse team. And I think it's an open question how they're going to play against better teams down the stretch, especially if they get into the playoffs. But this moment, I think, was really important for them to say, hey, we are who we thought we were, for lack of a better word.
For sure. And, the funny thing is, like, the remaining teams are all, except for Philadelphia, Atlanta is not exactly playing great. Saints are 4-8. Dallas should have been a win here, but they're not, you know what I mean? So like, it's it's a very good situation for them to then have gotten it righted on Sunday. Cause if you had gone to the bye with even if it was like a 17-13 win, it's like, you're going to feel a little bit different, but you saw the offense that we saw for most of the first 12 games, or like, except for the last couple, right? So I think that was the positive sign for them too, not just to win, but to look the way you did it, and just to get that offense back. Like, that to me was probably the biggest thing from Sunday, was getting that first drive, Sam, like, to finish that first drive, 3 plays, a big play, couple completions. Like, I just think that settled them. So that's, what do you think was the offensively? This would be silly because like the run game was so good, but what would be your biggest takeaway from what they showed Sunday? And people also want to know, they're asking about Cornelius Lucas at right tackle, and should he continue? You can, if you want to give your thoughts on that too.
Yeah. You took it away in the tee up. I mean, the run game was, I think, the thing that stood out. And maybe, I think Jaden's legs, like Dan Quinn talked about him being electric, that scramble for a touchdown he had, some of the design runs, like he just looks like, I think every week that we get further away from the rib, he just looks more like himself. And I would say specifically on the Cornelius Lucas part, I think he did a really nice job at right tackle, especially, not having played it this year. Dan Quinn talked about, him and Sam Cosmi working together on some combination blocks after practice. Like, Cornelius is, an 11-year veteran who really understands what it takes to be good in this league. And I think that, like, he's the exact type of guy that you want as your swing tackle. And now that Brandon Coleman seems to be holding down left tackle okay, I think he's definitely your second best right tackle. I still think Andrew Wiley probably is the starter there when he comes back. But even though, I think Cornelius played well, but it's this team. I think depth is one of their weaknesses, just considering where the roster was at and where they're trying to build it back to. But he's a piece, I think, that really stepped in nicely.
I think he's where you have good depth, because he can go into either side. And I do not see them taking out Andrew Wiley for one game like that, because there's a lot of history on their side with him. And I think one of the things they like about Wiley too is the ability to pull and the ability to get out in space. Like, you can't underscore that. Like, you see them doing that with all these linemen. And Lucas I like what Cornelius adds. He adds a size, he's experienced, he does a good job. But I think when you they like to play in space with that, and that's something that Wiley gives them. So just as an FYI for that. And I know people are stuck on last year with Wiley when he wasn't good, but when you also had a guy throwing 70% of the time. So that wasn't his strength. It was beyond moronic last year, Sam. But anyways, did you have something to add to that? I see you.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I think the perfect illustration of that is the first touchdown run by Brian Robinson when they run GT, and, you have pullers from the backside, and like that's an area where Wiley is stronger with his athleticism. Right. And I think that it was really good to see them. I was talking to Sam Cosmi in the locker room afterwards, and he was like, that is what they felt like they were missing, or at least like weren't as successful on. Because Sam was like, dude, like, we want to get out in space. We want to move. We want to bury people in the run game. And like, when you can do that, especially early, especially against, and I think that people are looking at the Titans record, or they're looking at their offense and they're sort of underestimating that run defense has been legit good this year. Yeah. It's been really good. And for them to do what they did, especially without Austin Eckler, who I think it brings a lot when you just like line him up in the way defenses prepare. I thought it was really impressive. And Chris Rodriguez, obviously, I'm sure you talked about him in the postgame pod, like he was impressive. But yeah, to me, like that was a really impressive running performance.
One thing I felt like was really good, you had the Beef brothers in the middle for Tennessee, and they weren't just running right at them. You're taking advantage of that. They're not going to be as quick laterally as maybe some others, but also like those linebackers were really aggressive trying to fill the hole, press it, cut back all game. And so then I think, I don't know if it was you or Ben brought up the 12 personnel stuff with Dan Quinn yesterday. And when he said basically like that could be, we know that things are game specific, but he also did say that could be more of what they do, a little bit more of in the future, because it was definitely more on Sunday.
They use 12 and 13 personnel, I think like
Right.
65% of the time, which was a season high for them. And I think that it's unfortunate, like the Eckler injury, because I thought 21 was working really well for them at times earlier this year. And so I would expect, like, especially when you have three, I think, really good, like very useful tight ends who have like, you know exactly what you're going to get out of them in specific situations. And so I think that you'll see more 12 and 13 from them as the season goes on.
Yeah, I do too. And but I think, the other thing too that was good to see is passing game had rhythm. And I do, with the whole rip thing, like it also coincided with a couple of those games against really, really good defenses. So it's hard to know like what was impacting the most, right? Whether it was rib, no practice, rib, opponent, whatever it was, there was just the rhythm wasn't there. And it was there Sunday. And, because Jaden, I felt like got his legs back a little bit against Dallas, but the rhythm in the pass game was so much better on Sunday.
And I would say talent and scheme are a part of that as well. Like, they had a ton of drops during that stretch as well. So, like, I think it's one of the beautiful things about football that I think you and I talk about all the time in the press room is like, often it is extremely hard to isolate one reason the thing is happening.
Right.
It's always hard to untangle all the meshed cords of like, okay, what is the problem here? And I think that like that's a good example. Like once they sustain drives and they get in shorter third downs and they can like start using tempo the way they want to, like the offense just looks great. But you have to get that thing started.
Right. That's why that first drive to me was massive, because I think it settled them down. You had a couple completions right away. It helps that Tennessee was playing 10 yards off McLaurin on the first down. So you get a quick little completion right away. You know what I mean? So, but I do think like that is, and they were in 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3 all game. That against Dallas, it was 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7 all game. That makes a big difference. If they can keep Brian Robinson healthy, then you may be able to, do you think that was I know, listen, 267 is going to be hard to duplicate, but do you think that was the start of a return to what they can be versus, what do you have questions about that? So, or is that what a 1-game thing you think?
Yeah, it's hard. I would say maybe. I don't want to overreact to a 1-game sample. And I think the key thing is here, and this is not a ding on him as a guy. I know he wants to be out there, but like Brian Robinson's health has, especially, in late in the season, the last 3 seasons has been, up in the air. And so if he can stay healthy, if he can, be kind of the run game, if he can be explosive, especially in the way he was, I think like that would be a huge benefit to this offense. One stat I want to throw out there, I love throwing out these stats, but like early in the season, they were hitting 3rd and long at like an insane rate, 36%, which was the most it had been since like 2020. Right. During that skid, they were hitting 3rd and long at 11%. And so I don't think they're as good or as bad as either of those numbers would suggest. And sometimes they were like converting those in the run game or with, those tunnel screens to Diami. They were finding ways to do it. And so if you can convert even those 3rd and longs, and if you can avoid those 3rd and longs because of Brian Robinson, because of the run game, I think that all works together. But to succinctly answer your question, maybe.
There you go. But I do, and it's a hard one to know because it really is a game by game thing. It's just that they looked like they had been, and they looked like that against a defense. While the scoring defense wasn't great, they were a good defense. And I can tell you, like, I know some of those coaches over there, they felt good going into that game about where they were going and where they were trending. But the one thing, when you have turnover machine like Will Levis, I mean, it makes life hard on a defense, and that did not help. So, but it wasn't even him; it was other stuff. But still, like that offense, the return game, the special teams are horrible for them. That's why they're 3-9 now. But their defense had actually been playing well, so I think it was a good thing for them. Playoff race. It's not, I know it's funny because when they were losing 3-0, people didn't want to hear the P word. But now it's 8-5. They got the last spot. How do you assess that right now? Like, who are the who is the team that you're looking at the most against these guys for that last spot?
You're saying that who could take the spot?
Which team do you think? Which team would you worry about the most? I should say.
It's a good question. I don't know if one like contender, I guess, like scares me more than others because they do have a 2-game lead. I think the thing that I'm thinking mostly about is like, can they catch the Packers for the 6th seed? And because right now I think the data, the probabilities suggest that, and obviously this could all change as we know, but I think right now it looks like they would be the last seed. They would go into Detroit or Philly, depending on who takes that. Who takes the 2nd seed. But to me, it's, I mean, are you afraid of Tampa Bay? Are you afraid of
Well,
Arizona?
that's the one team, but I see here's the thing with Tampa Bay. Atlanta's sliding. So, if you take care of business against Atlanta here, then Tampa Bay's got a better shot to win the division. One team is coming out of that division. The only reason I'd be worried about Tampa is if for some reason Atlanta gets hot again and Tampa is 10-7 as a second place team. I don't think that's going to happen.
So I saw a graphic from the NFL today that I thought was really interesting. And you can take this for what it's worth, but if you look at situations that are considered luck, dropped interceptions, dropped passes, fumble recoveries, the unluckiest team in the league has been Atlanta. So like if you expect that to bounce back or get a little more even, I do think they're better than their record suggests right now. But I should also point out, if you look at the luckiest team in the league, like by a pretty substantial margin, it's the Commanders. Even though they've had all those drops, they've had all those things. If you look at what the NFL's internal metrics say, they've been the luckiest. So I think that as we go forward, I agree with you about Atlanta. If they would end up in the wild card race and got hot, that would be a team that I would worry about.
Right. And I also I would say this, Atlanta was unlucky the other day because Kirk Cousins kept throwing to the other team. So that wasn't about luck. That was about a guy whose arm you have to wonder about at this point. And it makes me wonder when they come here in a few weeks, what that offense is going to look like, because man, like there was no zippy on that ball the other day, Sam.
So Kyle, are you like, it feels like you're kind of, you're digging out the position to be like an early person on, they were right to draft Penix because everybody was killing for them for that name.
Oh, I'm even saying that. Like, actually, I'll be honest though, like it was unusual. I will say that, but it's such an important position and he is old. Kirk is, but then, part of me is like, if you knew they needed more around that team, if you're getting a quarterback that age. So like, while I like the idea of taking him, I still think it was too much of a luxury, because if you thought Kirk was going to be like this, then it would have been hard to sign him the way you did. If you thought he was going to be somebody you needed to replace after a year or two, or after a year even, right? Don't you think?
Right. No, I mean, it doesn't, like, the roster building strategy doesn't make sense. The timelines don't map out. But if they, if they end up in DC and Penix is playing, I'm going to be looking. I'll look forward to watch either of them.
Oh,
but I'd like to see Penix a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. So the other thing I want to ask about is Marshawn Lattimore, because a few people are asking about that. And when a couple of people, E Plus and Silver Fox, basically want to know who will be the corners when Lattimore comes back. So, and we don't really have a good answer for that. But what would you do with that right now?
I'm curious why Silver Fox has parenthetical Ford after. Is that is that a different last name, or I'm just curious about that. Anyway, Silver Fox, drop that in, please. Marshawn Lattimore. So when they traded for Lattimore, I feel very confident that their plan was to shift Mikey inside and have Lattimore and BSJ outside.
Agreed.
I think that has changed. Like, a lot has happened since that trade. Sure. And now you have to wonder. I think, the rotation with BSJ and Mike Davis certainly, gives you an indicator of where the coaching staff is at with BSJ. I think probably like their best, if you're going like, what is their best combination of corners on the field? It is Mikey outside. It's Lattimore outside, and it's Noah in the slot. I could see it being a little matchup dependent, if they have, a guy has, is extra long or whatever, and you want BSJ to be in the rotation that week. But if you're talking the three best corners to me on tape over, since the trade, it's been those three.
Oh, for sure. And I think, like, listen, Sam still has surprised me, not because I think he wasn't going to be a good corner, but because of how well he has played outside. Now, I will say this, like, he's not perfect. And when you see it, like, there are definitely times I'm like, you gave that up. Like, you're a corner, you gave it up. But I just love the competitiveness that he has, even, covering AJ Brown and breaking up some passes against the Eagles. The other day, ripping that ball away, like, you have a pulling tackle coming around. And I keep telling you, Mikey Samuel still is our size, Sam. Now a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, but he's not a big dude. But yet he sticks his nose in there all the time. So if you're a coach, you're going to tap into, like, hey, I'm going to roll with the guy who's going to compete his ass off, right? So, like, that's where I think, but I do agree with you. I thought for sure, because we kept hearing that they view him, and I still think, and I would say now in the future, next year, I could see him back inside because I could see them going against that. But for this year, heck, man, like, I'm leaving him out there. And then now, if you want to roll with, then you can do matchup specific. And I don't think the E want to know about, would you bench St. Juste or not play him or whatever. I still think he's going to have a role because they still liked him enough to keep putting him out there. But I think then it becomes a matchup specific situation. I don't think he'd be inactive or anything like that, but I think that's where they have the luxury. And so, and Gearso wants to know, in our opinions, how does Lattimore help the defense? So I have a couple of things. So, like, you can look at, who they have to cover, AJ Brown, et cetera. But there was a play against Dallas that I go back to, which was the last touchdown before all the crazy stuff happened, the touchdown to the tight end over the middle. But it happens because you have St. Juste covering CeeDee Lamb on the right. Well, Quan Martin rotates over there before the snap to give him help. If you have Lattimore, you don't need to give him help. That's the difference, right? So now you can either roll to the other side, you can keep somebody in the middle. You don't have to roll to that side at all. And if you have somebody on the other side, like St. Juste, on Sammerstill, you can roll to that coverage that way. So it just gives you more freedom with what you want to do there. But then it's very matchups with some of the matchups they've had. Oh, the other one was against Pittsburgh, the Mike Williams touchdown. So does that happen if Lattimore is out there? So you can look at those plays and say, yeah, what do you think?
And I think to zoom out, I would say, like, Marshawn Lattimore lets the Commanders get closer to the defense they want to play. Joe Witt and Dan Quinn want to be more aggressive. They want to play more man coverage. Like, they want to create pressure in different ways. They want to press more. I think Marshawn Lattimore allows you to be a more physical, aggressive defense just in the way you align stuff. And there have been moments where, Joe Witt hasn't had to protect the corners or play too high or things like that. I think he really made a point of that in his press conference after Philly, I believe, to say, like, we didn't protect those guys. But I think that Marshawn Lattimore makes you feel better about game planning to say, like, okay, like, we're going to play man coverage on AJ Brown with Marshawn Lattimore, and then we're going to be good, we can do other things around that. So to me, it's about getting closer to the identity you wanted from day one.
Curious how St. Juste would play when he doesn't feel like he's number one. Well, first of all, I don't know that anybody feels like he's a truly top corner, but I will say this, like, he's been rotating with Mike Davis. You don't hear, he's not a guy who's going to cause waves. That's not his style. So I don't think there's any sort of issue. I think there definitely were corners here in the past, man. Like, you weren't here for this, but covering, like, Bashaud Breeland, Josh Norman, DJ Swearinger, one secondary, that was a trip. So, and like Breeland and Norman, like Breeland was very envious of Norman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is not going on in that cornerback room. And so, and someone else said there was no way the plan has changed. Now we're talking about the plan for Sammerstill. Definitely, we both think changed because they were very clear how they saw him. And whether or not they knew of the severity of Lattimore's injury, anybody who's in this game knows that, first of all, Lattimore had a history of that going back to his days in college, but also, that with hamstrings, they can be very tricky and take a while. So I don't know if it's longer or not than what they anticipated, but the Sammerstill thing, I think Sammerstill has played himself into being an outside corner as the number 2 guy when Lattimore plays. I mean, do you think we'll see him against New Orleans? I think we will, but who the hell knows?
Yeah, I think that's the way that it's trending right now. Also, I just figured out I was on like a different tab, I guess. And I just figured out how to read all the live comments. There's like a lot of comments in here, Kime. I see
Yeah,
you. All
I
right.
heard it.
This,
It's,
this is pretty
it's
cool.
my army, baby. You got a
Yeah,
good army here.
if I can take a second, I was just like scrolling. If I can shout out Commander Dan real quick, who's checking in from San Bernardino, California. I went to San
Yeah.
Bernardino in July to write a story about Jaden Daniels. Had
Did
a
you see
great
him?
time. Yeah, I don't think so. I had a great time. I went to Baker's with one of Jaden's like old high school friends. It was pretty cool. So thanks for tuning in from San Bernardino.
How many plays had you watched of his by the time you went out there? Was it all 3,600 yet, or was it just like 2,500? Or
This is gonna be wow. I honestly have no idea. Took me all summer though. That was basically my summer school.
I told you the one time that I spent an off season watching every play Robert ran his rookie year and charting everything to see where he was hit, how he was hit, what circumstances there were, et cetera. What you did, that's a long process.
What did you? So you must have taken a ton of notes.
I still have the notes.
I was just about to say, do you still have them?
I do. I don't know.
Oh,
They're somewhere in my office somewhere. But because it was like charted, like was it a zone? Because my whole thing was, what was he getting hurt on the zone reads or getting hit on the zone reads compared to scrambles? What was the down and distance situation? How hard would I measure the hit? Did he run out of bounds? Did he do this? So it was everything. And actually, it was one of the few stories I wrote in my month at the Washington Post. So yeah.
You should, dude. You gotta dig out those stone tablets and like post pictures of them of all your diagrams. It'd be pretty cool.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that I have that I can't even read anymore. So I think that would probably be it. But anyway, so how important? Last thing then on the bye week too, because how important for the offensive line for this group to get this bye week, and how badly do you think they needed it?
Oh, like Dan Quinn said, the tank was on empty. I think you could see that. I think it's not just the physical strain; it's the mental strain as well. Like, and for a young team that has a fair number of young guys, like them, that mental strain of, hey, like 13 straight weeks when you're used to the college schedule, which is I think much easier on you. It's a big deal to just kind of step back and reset. I mean, we have not gotten the chance to do the same, but like I know every year, like when we hit that bye week in December, it's like, all right, cool, like I can take a breath, I can go to the grocery store, I can like send out these Christmas gifts that I haven't thought of yet. Like it's a big deal for them, it's a big deal for us. It's I wish we didn't have to wait till week 14 every year, but it's good that it's here.
It is kind of amazing. And I also think, Sam, we're going to get screwed next year because how this league works. Like there are going to be a lot more primetime games, 4:00 games. The travel schedule is going to be dramatically different. I wouldn't be shocked if we have an overseas game. And listen, all that is because of number 5. So because he's a hell of a marketing tool for this team and for the NFL. Because have you seen anything from him at all that's like that suggests anything other than he's going to be a really good player?
No, that's the thing, man. In like, I got a couple emails that he's like inked some new sponsorships, recently. And so he's definitely leaning in, I think, to his celebrity, his increased profile. But like one of the things that, somebody from LSU told me is, his first year at LSU, he felt like his NIL obligations were like taking up too much of his time. And so his second year at LSU, when he won the Heisman, he started only doing NIL things on Sunday. He was like, hey, I want to do this, but I need to do it in a responsible way that allows me to like maximize my football potential. And so I'm only going to do it on Sunday. And so that to me is like, if he maintains that mindset and he is like able to continue compartmentalizing, like that's a huge deal for a young guy handling success in the league.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say on that too, like my experience has been that, guys who he is driven to be better, right? And guys who are more about the process and love the process will always get to a certain point. It's why like Bobby Wagner, the guys like that, Terry McLaurin, why they get better is because they're wedded to that process. And I think he is the same. I think from what we've seen so far, there's no doubt he's the same way. I think he will stay that way because if you go into this wanting the fame and the money, which is why we became sports writers, let's be honest, if you go into this, if you go into this wanting that, then it's going to be hard. And but if you go into this because you love this part of it, you love getting there at 5:30 every morning, right? Then you're going to have a long career and a successful career as long as you stay wedded to that process. And I think he will, but don't know. But we know is that it's been a hell of a start. So anything else you want to plug, Sam? Anything else you got to add?
No, I mean, continuing like the stadium coverage, that's obviously a passion project of mine. Something we did today, like that's going to be decided by the end of the year. So we're talking in the next 3.5 weeks, maybe even sooner. Like we'll know whether DC is on the table, this year or not. And then if it's not, then Josh Harris and others will have to make some pretty hard, big decisions. If it is on the table, that's a big deal. And we'll go from there. But you can find my work in the Washington Post. You can find it on TikTok, as Keim loves to remind people. You can find it on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, which is, I don't think even a discussion we've had on here yet. I won't get you all riled up. But yeah, you can find me there.
I told you, if they call it Blue Ski, I'll sign up. Until then. But anyways, I'll have to get you a t-shirt that says Sammy TikTok too. So, all right,
no,
Sam,
I'm all good.
I appreciate you coming on. Always enjoy it. Thanks a lot, man. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be back on Thursday morning with another show. Got a special guest for you, and talk to you next time.